Is American English better? Better than what, you ask? Well, better, for example, than British English, or Australian English, or South African, or anything else. And any politically correct linguist will tell you, of course not. All varieties are equal in the sight of God. Let's go, though. What can we say about American English with respect to British English, now that we know that there are in fact British Englishes? First, perhaps the most surprising thing is that in many of its phonetic and morphological features, and syntactic features as well, American English tends to be older. We think of the new world, the new advanced culture, as being better because it's newer. No, it's not. The English that went out to the Americas has stayed, in many of its features, locked in to the time of that displacement. There's a certain fossilization there. The rhotic nature of American English is due to this, to the stage at which it went out from Britain, when British English was mostly rhotic. Other things like the preference for the past participle gotten goes back to the 17th, 18th centuries, and so on. So it's not better because it's newer, in historical terms. Is American English more logical? In many respects it is, thanks, so the textbooks tell us, thanks to the work of Noah Webster, thanks to the simplification of the spelling system, thanks to the annotation of pronunciation rules, thanks to the use of American English in the 19th century as a language for immigrants, as a language that had to be learnt as a second or third language. These measures have made it considerably more logical than British English, which has been happy enough to retain its vastly illogical spelling system. Mind you, though, a lot more could be done to make all Englishes easier to learn by second and third speakers. American English might also be said to be clearer, partly thanks to the rhotic nature. If you write an R, why not pronounce it? Partly also to the existence of a secondary stress. Words like temporary in British English tend to become temporary in American English. You can actually hear all the syllables, and that helps, and that makes it a clearer language, at least with respect to the correlation between the spoken and written forms. And these are serious virtues. But is it a better language because of them? I want to pick up just a few things from the research that's been done on American English. Most of the things I pick up are from Lebov and the research that you should have read as part of this course. First, with respect to the age, the archaic nature of American English, it's of some interest to me that change within American English in many instances has been shown by Lebov to be going backwards, go back in time. You got those fishermen on the island of Martha's Vineyard who don't like the tourists coming in, and so go back in time to an anterior pronunciation of their vowels. And to me it sounds like they go back to something Canadian, however. Or the urban varieties in Philadelphia, which similarly become more pronounced in their difference and similarly look for what seem to us to be archaic differences for reasons that are not made obvious, but one suspects it's because they don't like things like Hispanics moving into the neighborhood and blacks moving in and different varieties of English moving into where they are. And there's this need to affirm their identity. And the affirmation of identity in those oppositional climates tends to look for and privilege that which is older. We are who we are because we've been here for a long time, as contradictory as that may seem in a new continent. However, it's a very important part of the dynamics of American English. Of course, American English can and has been also moving forward. And what that means to move forward in a language is very difficult, but I think the main thing to stress here is that much of what has been forward in the view of cultural progress has for Americans come from a mixing, a vital mixing, most significantly of Black English, Black American vernacular with General American. There has been a process of the different inputs coming together to produce not just a homogenized General American that linguists can and do describe as such, but also a cultural mixing and a way of doing things with language that is far more vital and richer than is the case, I suspect, in Britain and indeed in my own country, in Australia. That is, I don't think there's much cultural weight to be put on the arguments that Black English comes from Africa, developed through the Pidgin, then Creole, and has completely different origins. Part of that is certainly true. But the important thing for us, I think, is the way it has been able to mix with General American, and some features have been able to transfer across. When we watch Americans speaking, at the moment we're in a period of primary elections in the United States, we get lots of speeches. The degree of eloquence, degree of participative rhetoric is far beyond anything done in other cultures, well, in British or Australian cultures, to take the examples I'm familiar with. There is this dialogic use of language that comes from the church environment, that comes from certainly the modes of conversation typical of Black American English. You can find that in Obama's speeches, but also in Bill Clinton's speeches, which comes across. There is this great tradition of the use of language in a participative way. It's also a tradition of playing with language and the many variants that can be found. Pleasure in the use of language that I do find more in the United States than in contemporary Britain. Part of my fascination with American English, and I'm not pro-American ideologically in any sense, it actually came from reading a novel by Thomas Pynchon called Mason and Dixon, which portrayed these tremendous mixes of cultures, these crazy characters wandering around the Midwest speaking all sorts of languages, in the 18th century. And I do find a lot of that still remaining there in the vitality of the American continent, the North American continent, the one I'm talking about here. Is English better because it's American? Of course not. But are things happening in American English that have to be of interest to the rest of us? Yes, very much so. Do not confuse that vitality, that richness, that pleasure in language with globalizing capitalism. Do not write off American English as the foreign policy of the United States. There's far more to it than that, and you have to see it from within.